Hello and welcome to another edition of the Legal Zone. My name is Salon Phillips, your host, and with us today we have Miss Dr. Arlena Cheney. Welcome, Dr. Cheney.
Thank you. Welcome.
I love the pearls this morning.
Thanks.
And we have the esteemed Mr. John Salati.
Hello, Salon Phillips. Great to be back with you.
Great to see you again. And we have a very special guest with us today, and I'm going to get to her in a quick second. But first, we've had tons of people emailing in, and I love the comments that you all have. Remember, you could email thelegalzone@gmail.com, send in, or info@remuslaw.com. Send in your comments. We take the comments off because a lot of our cases are live cases, and we don't want opposing parties getting into a big debate on our comment section. So that's the reason why our comments are off. But tons of people want to know about what just happened recently with the Will Smith, Chris Rock. We're not going to talk about the community. We're not going to talk about the psychology. This is a legal show. So we are going to tackle the legal issues. My law students, get your pens ready, get your notebooks ready, get your little computer devices ready, because we're going to share some information that's going to be very helpful. All right, so we all know what happened. Chris Rock is a comedian. He was on stage and Will Smith slapped him. Let's talk about the legal issues of it. All right, first we have civil versus criminal. What's the difference between a civil suit and a criminal suit? Civil suit, just remember, person to person, right? Someone has done wrong to you, someone has hurt you, someone has taken something from you, and you now want to sue them directly. Civil. Criminal is a little different. Criminal is when someone commits a crime against the state. It could be against a person as well. Every state has a list of crimes. And if someone breaks one of these, well, not crimes, has a list of laws. And if someone breaks one of these laws, that's said to be committing a crime against the state. You've heard of state's attorneys, right? So an attorney for the state will bring a case or prosecute the individual who's accused of a crime. So civil, Dr. Cheney has an issue with John Salati. She sues John Salati. It would be Cheney v. Salati. Criminal, it's state, whatever state, versus the person. That's how you can distinguish whether it's a criminal case or a civil case. We all know about the O.J. Simpson trial. We've had Mr. Singler come on and talk about that and educate us on what went on behind closed doors. Well, that case was the state of California or the people of California versus Simpson. So how does a criminal suit become in existence? Or let's say, how do you start? How does one, we still have lots of people trying to come in. How does one initiate a criminal suit? Civil, you just go find an attorney, or you could do it yourself. And you say, this person wronged me and I'm damaged. Always remember, if you're not damaged, if you haven't lost anything, you don't have a suit. Well, with criminal, because you're not the one actually bringing the suit, what happens? Well, first, someone has to make a report either to the commissioner office of the state or a police officer. And the police officer or the commissioner of the state will gather up all the evidence and submit it to the state's attorney, the prosecutor. The prosecutor would review this information to determine whether or not a crime there's a possible conviction for this crime. This person could be convicted for committing a crime, but you have to prove that the crime was committed, or at least have evidence, right? So that's how it's initiated. Evidence is submitted to the state's prosecutor. The prosecutor reviews the evidence and says, yeah, I think I can bring a case against this person. I think I can convince a jury or a judge that this person committed a crime, and they present it to the judge. And that's how it's initiated. Let's talk about two crimes. And Ms. Winston, your video went off. Two crimes: assault and battery. No matter what you hear on TV, on the radio, if you're preparing to take the bar, don't listen to those definitions. At common law, an assault never involves touching someone. The definition of an assault is the intentional, it's always intentional. We haven't, yeah, we can talk about that. So civil punishment, you're usually paying some sort of money for damages. Criminal, we know it's usually jail time, right? So assault, the intentional placing of another. You intentionally place someone else in fear of bodily harm. The intentional placing of another in fear of bodily harm. That's an assault. You know, when we were younger, we used to walk around people in high school and like jump at them and they'll flinch. There was something cool about making people flinch. That's an assault. When you jump at someone, pointing a gun at someone, right? That's an assault. Placing someone in fear of bodily harm is an assault. The fear has to be real. The threat has to be real. You can't assault someone over the internet, because no matter how much I bark at you and threaten you, there's nothing I can do over the internet. Over the phone, you can't assault someone. And these are the questions that you'll see on the bar. Was someone actually assaulted? Another one that they love to put on there is someone was standing, Bob was standing looking at the game, and Jim came behind him and sucker punched him. Then they'll ask you, what are all the crimes that Jim committed? An assault would be there. Well, was he placed in fear? No. A sleeping person could never be assaulted.
Not aware.
Unconscious person can never be assaulted. You have to be placed in fear of bodily harm.
Wow.
And then as soon as you're placed in fear, boom, you have an assault. Now what comes next is the battery, the intentional, unwelcomed touching of another. It does not have to cause damage. Doesn't have to cause bleeding or bruising. You can literally touch somebody. And if that person didn't want to be touched and you intentionally touched them, that's a battery. All right, so we have assault, we have battery. We know how a crime is initiated. Someone needs to present evidence to a prosecutor, and it has to be, the evidence has to be strong enough to bring a case. If you don't have enough strong evidence, then you don't have a case. Why even bother? Let's talk about self-defense. What is self-defense, and is that a defense? We all know self-defense is a defense of a crime, right? It is justifiable battery, maybe. That's the way to put it, justifiable battery. Two things though, two things to remember with self-defense. Self-defense is, one, the threat of harm must be real, right? It has to be something or someone is about to harm you, and so therefore you defend yourself. And two, very important, the defense must be in proportion to the offense. Your self-defense has to be in proportion to the offender or the offense that's coming. If a 12-year-old girl gets angry at John Salati and she starts hitting him with her Barbie doll, John Salati, being a distant cousin of John Gotti, takes a bat, just playing, he's not, or he might be, I don't know. He takes a bat and wails on her.
Mm.
And then he says, what? It was self-defense.
Hmm.
No,
Not just.
that was out of proportion of the offense.
Mhm.
If someone is coming to attack you and they have their hands, their fists, unless you're, shout out to Topaz Navarro, unless your name is Topaz Navarro, he's my self-defense jujitsu instructor with deadly hands. You cannot defend yourself with a gun. Most people are not, their hands are not deadly weapons. So if someone is fighting you and you want to have self-defense as a valid defense, you must either fight back or run.
Mm.
Unless that person is a skilled Topaz Navarro type of guy. So what about third-party defenses? Can one use the defense of self-defense to defend a third party? If Dr. Cheney and I are walking down the street in Washington, DC, and out of nowhere, a big dog, Rottweiler, pit bull, they're more ferocious, right? Jumps over the fence, and that dog is coming, and I'm seeing the dog, and it's coming right at Dr. Cheney. And I'm like, whoa. And I can see that dog is about to jump on her. But because I've taken self-defense from Mr. Navarro, who's, by the way, is located in Columbia, Maryland. If anyone's in Columbia, Maryland, look him up. I see the dog coming, and so I step in front and I spear the dog, right? And the dog falls, and then I sprawl on the dog. It's a move where you like fall, and I break all four of the dog's legs.
Mm.
And then the owner comes out and says, wait, she's a puppy. What have you done? Now wants to sue me because I was defending Dr. Cheney. And I say, look, this is Dr. Cheney. She's an important part of our show. What do you mean? I had to defend her. Would that fly? Yes, it would. You can use self-defense to protect a third party. But again, remember the rule, the threat has to be real.
Mm.
A pit bull running towards Dr. Cheney, growling, is a real threat. And the defense has to be proportionate to the offense. Me spearing the dog and falling on it is in proportion to that. So that would work. So now let's talk about the slap heard around the world.
Mhm.
We're saying, and in the legal field, they're wondering, why didn't Will Smith go to jail? Why didn't he get arrested? And that's a valid question. Because the officer said, well, Chris Rock didn't report. He didn't do a report. So there you have it. But is that a prerequisite before someone could be charged with a crime? If an infant is crawling across the floor, and I choose to kick the infant onto the chair and the cop sees it, would the cop say, well, we're going to wait until this baby files a report? No. They'll arrest me. Why? Because they have enough evidence. The officer saw me do it, right? So the officer's justification for not initiating a suit against Will Smith is kind of, because everybody saw it. There's enough evidence there to initiate a criminal suit against Will Smith. Criminal. Now, civil, we know that Chris Rock, if he wants to, he can initiate a civil suit Why? Because everyone saw it, and there's emotional damage that quite reasonably is there. With the criminal, did Will Smith, did he commit a crime? Well, we know what assault is. He walked up to Chris Rock, and even though Chris Rock might not have initially felt he was in any fear of bodily harm, he leaned forward. If you look closely, right before the smack came, he flinched, right? So that was an assault. As soon as he realized he was about to be hit, that was the assault. And then what followed is the battery. So a crime was committed. 2 crimes were committed. Now, what about self-defense? Will Smith said, well, I was defending my wife. Well, self-defense is, you can use it to defend a third person, but let's look at whether or not it meets the elements. Was she in any harm of danger, bodily danger? The answer to that question is no, right? But even if we assume that she was in some sort of threat, was the defense of what Will Smith did with the slapping in proportion to the offense of Chris Rock's joke? And I think the answer to that is also no. Will Smith, and I think this is why so many people is disappointed in Will Smith, is because a proper defense would have been for him to use his mouth to defend his wife.
Okay.
And Will Smith is a very intelligent man. He can solve a Rubik's Cube under 5 minutes. He had a scholarship to MIT. He has the ability and the intellect to effectively formulate sentences to communicate what he's feeling and thinking. We've all seen him do it. So it was not really necessary, some argue, for him to use his hands to convey the message of this joke was hurtful. So that's that in a nutshell. The slap heard around the world. Remember the definition of assault, battery. Remember how you can bring a charge against another person criminally. Now to our wonderful guests for the morning, Professor Annette T. Winston. Currently, she's an independent consultant, and she's a professor with a long history serving government, private, and nonprofit organization. She holds a master's degree in behavioral and social science, a BA in recreation therapy, and director's credentials in early childhood education. She was born right here in Washington, D.C., and she attended public school from elementary until she completed graduate school. She aspires to expand her audience beyond the classroom to platforms where her discovered treasures can be shared. And we are very grateful and thankful to have you here, Professor Winston. How are you this morning?
Oh, just wonderful, and just so thankful and grateful for this opportunity. So I just want to give a round of applause for your presentation. Thank you for your team with Dr. Cheney and John, and just making me a part of this experience. So it ingrained in my heart my gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Basically, I kind of merge my career with my personal life. I just don't really see a distinction, in the sense that when I think about creation, and we were created before we became human. And so when I look back and I reflect on those things, I see myself as fearfully and wonderfully made. I see myself as learning from others. I see myself as challenging things. Like I was an athlete. I was a professional athlete, and I didn't send that. I was a professional runner. Tried out for the Olympics. One of our teammates actually made it, and her name was Sheila Ingram. I love all types of music, classical music, music that has meaning. Music is just so miraculous to my spirit because of the words that's in the music. I'm a mother of one. I'm a grandmother as well as a great grandmother. And I spend a lot of energy when it comes to people, especially children. Currently, I'm working as a rec specialist with a program with the District of Columbia. And the families that we serve are very affluent families with overflowing resources. And so, and I just share everything I learned from the Word of God to what I take into whoever I'm communicating with.
Okay, now you talked about you work with young people, and as you know, this show is a show about justice. You mentioned that there's some injustices that you've noticed in your line of work. Tell us about those.
Because of the population that I currently work with, or have worked with as well in the past, in many different settings, I have found through observation and conversation with individuals is that parents so often have these very high expectations of their children. They want them to know the basic fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but what's left out is the social and emotional foundation of what gives their child the strength to thrive when things get difficult. For an example, we have children that come to us that are at an age where they should be skilled in certain areas. For an example, potty training or feeding themselves, or just being able to socialize. And they are behind the 8 ball simply because families want to put them in these private institutions or put them in schools that are bilingual, multi-language schools, and they forget the emotional side. And my thinking is, because our families have such extensive background and credentials and so forth, why they don't see the basic stages of development. They go sort of from my baby is born to straight to what they want. And there's a danger in that. And that's what makes it injustice, because when they come to me, I'm having to go all the way back and build that foundation of their social and emotional development. Our children, they whine a lot. Some of them don't have the language skills that they should for their age. Research years ago said that our kids are 3,000 words behind children that are affluent. But what it didn't tell you is that those individuals' social skills are very, very low. Their emotional skills are very, very low. And so when you see children like that and they're constantly nurtured in an environment, not the environment I'm in, but their home environment specifically, which can be an injustice, because the parents are looking for a future. They're not operating in the present. You don't even hear them speaking of the past. Everything is future tense. I want my child here. I want my child to do this. We're going there. We're like, okay, what about where the child is right now? And that is missing over and over, because we have this adult perspective of children. We don't go to a child's level. We think at an adult's level. But when you're working with children or you're interacting with children, you have to come down to their level. Have you ever heard in school, they say, well, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you. Well, if I'm standing up and a child is sitting down, that's not going to happen. I recalled teaching my son that very principle. And he said to me, Mom, I am looking at you. And I'm like, but I need you to look at me. And when I looked up, my son had grown taller than myself. That was a valuable lesson for me. So in my future experiences, my current and future experiences, I make sure I tap in to where the child is, not where I want them to be, but where they are. Because if I can tap into where they are, I can gradually move them towards where they should be developmentally. A lot of times when you're emotional, your social, your cognitive, your language, and your physical, if it is off balance, we find that we create other issues down the road. A lot of our children who should be able to run and kick a ball at 2, they have no clue. They don't even know how to position their hands to even catch a ball at 2 and 3. Why? No opportunity, no experience. Their world is cognitive stimulation over and over and over, which isolates them. Sometimes you can see children that appear to be engaging in a group only because they're standing there. They're not actually engaging. They're present, but they're not engaged or they're not involved. So we will mistake that as, oh, they have very good social skills, and I stay with social and emotional skills so much because it's so critical to the other developmental domains that children have to pass through.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to get Dr. Cheney in. Dr. Cheney.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Professor Winston.
Good to
Glad to
see
see
you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, you have so much to offer. I'd like for you to bear with me a second or two and apply some of your theoretical concepts to Will Smith and Chris Rock.
Well, the first
Well,
thing I think, about.
I have a comment that I wanted to make that I want to
Okay.
pull you in.
Okay.
Media reports of Chris Rock and Will Smith's traumatic childhoods, and you know about childhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Chris went to basically an all-white school, and he was called all kinds of names and all that, he said. He was bullied, beaten, terrorized, and he even used this word rapish. There was some kind of sexual something went on. I don't know what that is, but media is reporting that. And then you got Will, who witnessed domestic violence. So both of these individuals use what? Humor. My question is, how do men like this manage these early life memories? What do you think about that? How do they do what they do? How do they survive once they've had these kinds of backgrounds?
Yeah, it's called the survival of the fittest. You do what it takes to get you by. And as long as someone doesn't know your past or your background, you continue to get a free pass. I was just thinking that they've both been very traumatized, but in 2 different ways. But at the end of the day, their foundation has been shattered. That social and emotional foundation that we all need in order to get from one level to the next. They enter into what Erik Erikson speaks about, the psychosocial development of young children. And he does a comparison of a positive and a negative. Trust versus mistrust. If a child is raised to trust you, they thrive very, very well. If they're raised to mistrust, there's a lot of hidden anger, a lot of hidden dangers, a lot of hidden resentment that just lying dormant. It just stays there. No one knows what the trigger is. In Will's case, it got to be too much. That was a trigger. And he went all the way back to childhood. Children or adults will relive their childhood over and over in their minds. They won't share it with anyone. And so when they're able to get that past and they never have the opportunity to really express their deepest feelings, because what do people see or what does society see? He is accomplished. They're making us money. Look what they can do. And the real person, that social emotional person, is being buried every single time. They're just almost invincible. We see, but we don't see. And we have a tendency to see what we want. We don't see like, well, why would he do that? The other thing we miss is body language. We miss all the cues of body language. When you see someone sitting in a chair and they're laughing and they're squirmish and they appear agitated, and then the verbal side comes, and then because Will went through 3 stages. He went through nonverbal, he went to verbal, and then he became physical. And when you have that kind of smoking gun just piling up within your system, you have to have an outlet somewhere. And his outlet led him into a lot of trouble. Chris Rock is because people laugh to cover up their pain. They get other people to laugh, which fills them with the antidote that they need to keep going. So let me stay here because it's working. Look at these people around me, they're laughing. So now he's being encouraged. They don't know that they're encouraging him. This is something he has internalized for himself. And he kept going and he kept going. He never read any cues of Will or Will's wife. And it led him to have this physical act displayed on him. So many dynamics and integral parts of why people kind of behave and do what they do. But what I do know and what I do understand, if a child does not have the basic foundation of trust in a social and emotional environment, it is going to rain havoc over the years if it does not get addressed. It doesn't matter about your money. It doesn't matter how well you dress. It doesn't matter what state you live in, what your home looks like. Those are just band-aids to the real deal. And we saw the real deal the night of the Oscars. I didn't see the slap because I tuned out when Chris kept going in, going. Will did his best to gain self-control. That's the other thing. Children on a social emotional level have to know how to self-regulate. That's learned in infancy. How do we know that when children cry and the parent realizes, I played with you, I've sung with you, I've fed you, I've changed you, I've clothed you, and you're still crying. Why are you still crying? The child has no idea. So the parent have to kind of wait it out so that the child can learn, I'm not going to run every single time that you need me. So these are skills that do not transfer over into adulthood. This is why the violence is so out of control. Nobody has self-regulatory skills that's learned at birth.
Okay. I have another one. I think it's kind of interesting, even if I have to say so myself. Why do you think there is so much outrage in the media about the violence by Will Smith on Chris Rock when Black on Black crimes are flooding the media daily? What's the difference? Is it location? The people that are involved?
Well, you have to also look at what individuals are seeking. And just like I shared a little earlier, everyone wants to be recognized. And when the media sets out to zero in on individuals, because some of this is some of their livelihoods too. I make money when I get ratings. And so they don't care where the crime is really coming from. My concern is that they don't address it. I look at it as you legalize marijuana. You know, the drug situation is out of control. You see the homelessness is growing. What do you think those things are going to lead to? Violence in any setting, but mainly among our setting, because African Americans or Blacks, we are disproportionate when it comes to things that should be fair, and they are not fair. But yet, when we do succeed, they figure out how to take it and make it their own. So the media, this is their livelihood. They could care less one way or the other. As long as I'm getting the ratings, I'm getting the big titles, I'm making my promotions, I'm going to go dig for as much dirt as I can. Also, look at the progression. We went from the situation with the election, right? Then we went, since that was an issue. Then we had this war over Russia dealing with Ukraine. So that got all the media attention. Well, now look what's getting the media attention. Oh, COVID showed up. Election, COVID, war, Oscars. They will jump to anything that's going to get them the most attention. Why? Because it produces ratings. But at the same time, you're telling me, oh, we want to help Black Lives Matter. We want to help children, that we need to be more educated. Well, how do you make us more educated when all you promoting is negativity?
So Professor Winston, are you suggesting in your comment that we have if you think of a backdrop, you got this Black on Black crime all the time. So that does not result in the dollar, because it's always about the dollar.
It's
okay?
always.
So yeah, so that doesn't result in the dollar?
Absolutely, because the more we can keep, case in point, as a director of a parenting program, and we provided services, and I wanted to bring in a substance abuse counselor because the young children were getting high, as well as the parents. And I'm like,
How old were they?
These were youth. These were young people, and they became parents at a very early age. So we had their children in the early childhood classrooms. My role was to reach out to the parents, and as a result, I thank God for that, because the parenting involvement grew, which is kind of rare. And when you spoke with the parents, you can see, you can only teach what you know. So if you don't know much, you can't give much. If you're an addict or you're an alcoholic, most of their behaviors are very violent, very aggressive. And who gets the blunt of that? The child or the children. So the child is now coming up with these aggressive, violent skills. So it just continues generation after generation. Well, it makes money because we're going to pretend we have this program for you, that program for you. What the guy said to me, he said, Annette, he said, the system don't want too many success stories. That just blew me away. I said, we have all of these social services that's supposed to be geared and designed to support the well-being of high-risk population of children, youth, and families, and all you want is a few success stories.
Wow.
So that said a lot right there. The system is not for making things better. The backdrop is we put a mask on, because when we go to our offices, it's a whole nother story.
That's an injustice right there.
That's an injustice right there. Your entire system is an injustice. And when you have children born to abuse, the mother is carrying the baby in the womb, And that baby is born to abuse because the baby is connected to the mother's umbilical cord. That's the baby's lifeline. So any trauma to that mother is gonna penetrate to that umbilical cord, and it transfers. How often have you heard you say, people, if you want your child to be a doctor, read doctor books. If you want them to be a musician, read to them. I mean, play music while you're pregnant. They tell you, because the baby can feel the vibrations and the moods of what's going on from the womb. But when those healthy things are withdrawn, you come out with a baby that's fragile. They shaky, they scream. They don't just cry, they scream. And it's horrifying. And a lot of times, way back in the day, when I started out working with adults with mental retardation, they created institutions because they didn't understand the behavior of the young children and the adults. So they just locked them away. No plan of action, no anything. So it's a cycle that just continues, but the hole grows deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay.
Do you have another question?
I don't know if you want John in or not, so I can wait.
John, you want to jump in?
Well, this has been certainly a different kind of discussion than we've tended to have, and that's and yet still touches on the heart of what we do. And then going back to Dr. Winston's original early comments, the injustices that children experience, no matter where we find them at times.
That's right.
And it's hard to frame it as, the injustice of abundance, but it almost sounded like that's sort of what you were presenting, that sometimes too much is not a good thing, because other things get lost. And so now we have children who suffer injustice because of a dearth of resources, and we have children who suffer because they're in a situation where there's an abundance or an overabundance of resources, and in either case, much of the fundamentals get lost.
Yes.
To formulate a question around that. I just see it as an observation, but
the question that jumps out at me is, what's the solution?
Well,
how can we tackle this injustice?
Well, from the perspective, because I have direct hands-on, and I've developed, and I told Dr. Cheney, I've developed a couple programs where you have to have the parent and child interacting together, where you're kind of guiding the parent through this process, and they in turn demonstrate it with the child, because a lot of behaviors and a lot of things have to be unlearned. We have learned so much that in our minds we think this is the way. And so we have to almost hold their hands. People don't want to take that kind of time. They need it quick. We have to spend time. We have to stop going after all of this grant money, because you haven't resolved this issue. You haven't resolved that issue, but yet here's some money for this thing and here's some money for that thing. Well, what happened to the things back there? And everything just gets brushed to the side. So the kind of work that I do, observation, is so critical. We need to be able to see what the body is talking about. Never say a word. The child never have to say a word. What is the body doing? I've seen, I know the interest of all the kids. wherever I work, I know where their interests are. Why? Because I observe. I see where they gravitate to. Those are the tools that I use to communicate with them. Those are the tools I use to redirect them. Those are the tools that I say, you know what? This is why you're awesome. We don't lift up our children in a positive manner. We beat down on them. For an example, when children are born, oh my goodness, parents are all in their face. The baby can't even rest well. You all up in it. Oh, baby, feet, on it, every little detail. But as that child grows, the adult moves further and further and further and further away, instead of moving closer and closer and closer. And you know what the justification is? Oh, you're 5. You should know better. No, I'm doing exactly what a 5-year-old does. You just want me to be a miniature adult so that you don't have to tend to certain things anymore. When we're teaching them to walk, we put all kind of props in place. We hold their hand. So there's a lot of things we do with young kids early on that we need to do as they continue to develop. I've seen it work. I have tried different theories, worked at a school last summer, and we had 12 and 13-year-olds don't want to talk to anybody, into their own world, doing their own thing. But my presence was key. I went to visit them kids at every class, every single day, several times a day. I became very animated with them. Guess what got them talking to me? When I bought those big floor puzzles to the school, when I went back to the room, every kid said, we finished our puzzles. Can we keep them up? Do we have to put them back in the box? No. From that moment, I said, oh, we going somewhere now. So I used the puzzles to generate conversation. We always want to talk about what children are not doing. Can the children tell us what we're not doing? They bet not think of it.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, John. Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's great. And so part of then what I hear you saying is this idea that in the area of child development, on either end of the socioeconomic spectrum, it is not so much the external resources or lack thereof that is necessarily the problem. It's the internal resources of the guardians, parents, what have you. Not to say, again, lacking resources can create certain problems, but nevertheless, being poor does not automatically create a negative outcome. Absolutely. If you've got the internal resources, is what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when I was doing some stuff, and I was saying that, and I talked about the umbilical cord, but I also talked about that Eric Erickson, when he talks about the 8 stages of psychosocial development, if a child learns to mistrust, he or she cannot get to the second stage, which is autonomy versus shame or doubt. Because look at when little kids are coming up. Now, mind you, they have been, before they start walking good, the average kid walks around 11, 12 months, right? You got some kids walk a lot sooner, but that's rare. So as soon as that child begin to walk, parents go, no, don't touch that. Leave that alone. Come over here. Don't do this. Don't do that. All the cat here is everything I do is wrong. Now, the parent can do 2 things. The parent can either move some of those things, because you got to look at the child for 11 months minimum has been observing everything in that home environment and can't wait to get to it. What is that? I want to touch that. Sigmund Freud say children learn through object prominence. This is why they put things in their mouth. Not so much that they want to put it there. This is how they discover whether I should or shouldn't. And so when we see those kinds of things, we have to be very careful. The program, and I work with all children, and we talk about ears. Whose ears working today? Let's see whose ears are working. That's so that they can listen. And if they're not working, I'm like, oh, look like we gotta go find somebody's ears. Miss Annette got her ears, because children are very visual as well. So when you can demonstrate and show them the language that you're communicating with them, they're more motivated to say, hey, this is not a bad thing that I didn't just listen this time. And the healthy thing I've seen is them little ones, they go tell the other little ones, oh, did you use your listening ears? Or she might say, where are your listening ears? And so those little things, it takes a lot of energy. So you can't be laid back on a couch, being a couch potato, or just interested because your child can kind of navigate the house by themselves. You must be present.
Dr. Cheney, you had one more question before we close out?
Well, I'm back to Chris Rock, and
You like the Chris Rock and Will Smith thing, huh?
yeah, I'm back to Chris Rock.
Across the world.
Have a quick one.
Across the world. Everybody's talking about it though, right?
Yeah.
Like everywhere you look.
Yeah. So Chris Rock has been silent on the Oscar conflict. We all know about that.
For now.
Yeah. And I know about this notion of a victim and villain theory. You start off, let's say Chris, as the victim. By the time it rolls around, if he isn't careful, he'll become the villain. So I'm trying to see what other people think, because my view is I think he should remain silent because of this notion of movement in the way that we can perceive him. So do you think that Chris could lose the public view of him as a victim and emerge as a villain if he began commenting?
Well, my thing is silence is not always golden. And in his case, he's been silent far too many years because of his upbringing. You see, now he has this voice and he's articulating, be it appropriate or not. The individuals that's surrounding him and giving him legal advice, it needs to be healthy advice. He also has to accept ownership of his role, but guess what? He was getting a paycheck. So he's doing what the boss say do. But I heard in the news where he went off script. See, when we deviate from what it's supposed to be and you do your own thing, he opened up Pandora's box. So I don't know if individuals are looking at it from that, and I'm not giving Will a free pass, because you just gave confirmation of Black on Black crime or Black on Black violence. You should never have done that.
It was definitely a crime.
Right. So when your brains get distorted that you are above everyone because the system has fed you these things, you lost track of you. You can never lose track of self. You have got to check in with where you are, because the enemies, they're always lurking. And Chris Rock, I'm on center stage. I got all the attention. He went off script and it got him in trouble. Well, as a result, with Will, the same thing. Will would have been silent too. He didn't verbalize at first. He wrote first. Somebody's pushing him to talk. But the
Who do you think is pushing him to talk? Do you think his wife plays a role in any of this?
Well, according to what I was listening to or heard in comments from others, is that after he saw the reaction on his wife's face, is when the flashbacks of his childhood showed up. That's what happened. And he went, it's almost like a blackout. He went into defense mode.
Oh, your
He
mic.
couldn't defend, yeah, he couldn't defend his mom back then. And so therefore, that memory showed up. He responded. He did not take time to take some deep breaths. People have got to learn. We carry so much stress. If you
Which
think
could, by the way, now that you mentioned that, now we talked about if a criminal charge was to be brought up against him, the self-defense thing wouldn't go because the elements are not there. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a defense.
right,
Will could possibly, and his attorneys may be ready for this, but if there were to be a criminal charge against him, he might be able to plead insanity, temporary insanity. If he says what you said, that my mind went blank and all I could see is me being a little boy and my dad beating my mom again, and so I felt I needed to, maybe.
right. Because
What do you think about that, John?
because I say that because when he began to write or talk, he went back to that place. He didn't go to the place where he is today.
But did you know that they're rolling some kind of clip that's saying that the wife was actually smiling after the slap? I
Yeah,
haven't seen that,
I've
so
seen it. She was laughing.
I don't really know.
The clip
And
is from
I'm
behind and
wondering-
she's going like this. She's going like she's having a good time. But
So is there some kind of approval that Will was waiting for, and he got the approval?
We can make assumptions all day.
I don't know.
yeah.
That, we have to be very, and that was one of the notes that I had was of making assumptions, because it could just lead us all over the place.
All over the
And
place.
the only reason I'm asking this is because you talk about little children and the
Yeah,
notion that little children do seek approval.
they do. I mean,
And
it's in their
and he's
DNA.
reverting back to a state
Yeah.
that is youthful.
And nothing is off the table in
Mhm.
terms of Will's emotions.
Yeah,
And if he stayed in the lane of the pain that he felt by not being able to defend his mom,
yeah,
then the tables could turn, like he was talking about Chris Rock. Rather than him being the victim, it could be the other way. To me, it's those two that's going to be able to squash this no matter what the media says.
mhm.
It has to be them two in agreement, in solidarity, to say, hey, look, it's a mishap. It took place. We're moving on. We have a long history, but they want to continue. See, the world goes after your emotions. Emotions aren't honest.
Yeah,
They are all over
yeah. John, I wanted to ask
them. I don't know how to get this. Oh, okay. It's
There
off
you
now.
go.
Sorry about that. But your emotions, you cannot predict what they are when a trigger is pulled.
right.
Mm.
So John, real quick, what do you think about the idea of a lawsuit against Smith?
Lawsuit or a criminal action?
Let's go with the lawsuit.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But I think so we talked about the two criminal.
So Rock making a civil suit?
Right, so let me just lay the foundation. Criminal misdemeanor battery is what he would be up against in California, which is not really jail time. Maybe he'll get probation, something like that. But the civil side of it, it's more hefty, right? Jim Carrey came out and said, if it were me, I would file a $200 million lawsuit against him. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I've heard that. A mutual friend of ours, who shall remain nameless, has been very big on that idea. And I'm
To
thinking,
tackle the
why would-
injustice, to tackle the
Yeah,
injustice,
but why would Chris Rock do this?
to tackle the injustice.
He certainly doesn't need the money. right?
Right.
Unlike our friend, let's say. And I think although the world is not happy with what Will Smith did, in that moment, nobody was a Chris Rock fan up until Smith gets up on that stage. You know, if you watch the clip, right, he makes the remarks and the audience goes, woo, oh, come on, it's a joke. In other words, he was making no friends in that moment with what he said. Certainly not with that audience in front of him. So I would think from his point of view, all this does is sort of now put him in the victim role when he started it.
We started.
And so I don't see where Chris Rock wins by doing it. Can he do it? Yes, he's got, I mean, again, unless you're, shall we say, the former president, you know, it's on stage, it's filmed before millions of people.
Everybody sees it.
There's no lack of witnesses. This is the motion for summary judgment moment. There is no debate about the facts.
Right.
Here. So yeah, he's gonna win because for one, it's a lower standard, right? It's just, you know, beyond a preponderance of the evidence standard. There's no insanity defense that's probably going to fly in a civil lawsuit scenario.
Right.
He's gonna win. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he were awarded $1.
Well, that would be the thing. It would be, well, how badly did this crime against you impact you? What if he comes and says, look, I'm 57 years old. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be forever known as the comedian who was slapped at the Oscars. I have to live in shame. I can't go out anymore. He has 9 brothers, right? And his 9 brothers are comedian. Well, not all 9 of them. I know 2 for sure. And they're going out saying how this happened to my brother. I mean, I think it's not a far stretch to say if any of us get slapped on stage, we're going to be pretty embarrassed, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Will it impact his ability to do what he does? Well, so far, no. I mean, in other words, he's still going out, he's performing to packed houses.
But it's yet to be seen how effective he is, right? He has these shows lined up for the rest of the year, but maybe he's not going to be as funny because now he's fearful someone else is going to jump up and slap him. That was his staple. I could talk about whoever I want to talk about and make funny jokes and people will laugh. Well, now he may not be that funny anymore. He wasn't a big movie star like Will. You know, no one wants to go and sell out his movies, but he's the comic. So I don't know.
Does he start pulling his punches, shall we say?
Right.
To
People
play
might
on
say,
words there, his comedic punches, because now he's hesitant. He can make the argument, but I just still want to say he still ends up coming off looking bad. To file a lawsuit at this point, that's just my gut thing. It's not a legal thing. It's just my gut thing is in the court of public opinion, which is absolutely critically important for a performer, he is not going to come off well. You know, Will Smith is going to have to deal with this. In other words, if there's some kind of payback that Chris Rock needs, the smart move for him is to sit back, shut up, let the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences do its thing, and whatever else is going on. And that would be whatever payback he's going to get.
Did Chris Rock suffer an injustice?
Of course.
If the answer to that
yes, I mean, yes, but he inflicted an injustice.
He provoked it. It was a cause and an effect.
So it's not like what I'm going to say. Most of the clients we represent almost invariably those people have done nothing or done so little in comparison to what happens to them that we say, yeah, an injustice has occurred. You know, the tenants issues
And-
that
and-
we've looked at.
Right, and you
The
know,
tenants did nothing to deserve what's happened to them.
but in every case, the defense says they have, right? If you look at the Walmart Athena Phillips case, they'll say, well, she was with someone that was stealing. She shouldn't have been with him. She brought that on herself, right? Every case we have. someone has-
But see, that's a different thing than saying Athena did something that actually impacted Walmart. She may have, let's take the devil's advocate. She may have made a misjudgment in being with that guy that day when he did something wrong, but she did nothing to Walmart. Whereas in this situation, Chris Rock made an offense against someone, against Will Smith's wife.
Yeah, but
So
again,
now you're balancing again, it's your proportionality point.
right. And not only that, it's a lot of subjectivity because some people heard the joke and said he was comparing her to a strong woman who was in the military who had shaved her head. That was a compliment, right?
It was also a movie.
It was a
also
movie. It was right. It
Yeah.
was a movie
Yeah.
about G.I. Jane, who the character, some men say it was the hottest they've seen the woman. You know, she was working out, she shaved her head, she was in the military, and Chris Rock compared her to her. People look at that and say, where's the offense? Right. So it's a lot of subjectivity. And then we have to go back and we go back to the law and we say, even if we say Chris Rock did something offensive, we have to say, was it legal or illegal?
Oh, no, there was certainly nothing illegal. He didn't break, again, see, then we
Didn't
get
break
back,
any- break
the
any-
civil
now-
tutor is in a criminal suit.
Now, did
And-
Will Smith break any laws?
Of course, yes, as a criminal action, he did,
Right.
you know.
So once when you look at that, then you go back to the question, did Rock suffer an injustice?
I want to ask you two, isn't it odd that Will was able to walk up on that stage and you got security all around?
That's very puzzling because one, we know based on the definition of crimes, he committed 2 crimes, an assault and a battery. 2, had he done it to a woman, would the result have still been the same? Had a woman said the exact same thing Chris Rock said, would they allow him to stay there and receive his award? We can speculate and say no, because he's this tall guy and this is a woman. I've heard some people say if it was a white woman, he would have been let out in handcuffs, right? So there's a question of, well, why did they allow him to continue and not arrest him? Because security was there and they witnessed a crime. They saw it. They didn't need someone to report it. A lot of time in domestic cases, if you have a man and a woman at home and either one hits the other and they call the police is going to come, they can file a report, but they need that report. Because if either one of them says, I'm not going to testify, there's no case, there's no evidence.
But isn't the truth is we treat certain people differently?
Well, we're not supposed to.
We're
And
not
I think-
supposed to, but back to these resources. We don't know what kind of circle Will is operating in. We saw it with the whole the campaigning of the president and all of these other things. Black and white, clear as day. You saw crime after crime after crime, but yet innocent. And
Yeah.
so it depends on your circle and who you have in your corner. We don't know. That's the conversations we don't know anything about. And what I don't hear, I hear the physical side of the situation, but not the emotional side.
Right.
And you rarely hear emotional type testimonies in court, or I'm emotionally like this here, verbal and emotional abuse. It is real. It is very, very real.
That would be the
Um,
basis of a suit. If Chris Rock were to file a civil suit, the basis would be the emotional damage. Because he didn't bleed. He didn't
What
lose it.
about contributory negligence?
It wouldn't be because he was doing his job.
Well, he went off script. See,
Yeah,
that
but
he went.
his job is to make fun of, and you've seen it all the time. And if they actually showed some prior ones, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That guy from England who usually hosts it, he would go in on people.
Ricky Gervais.
Yeah. That guy. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I've seen some of his Oscar monologues, and he took no prisoners. It's true.
But we could talk about this all day. Professor, thank you so much for coming on, Professor Winston, and
Thank you.
sharing with us about the child development. And it's unfortunate that parents don't realize how much of a role they play early on in the well-being of their children that only has the results that we see later in life.
They're the child's first teacher, but yet they turn them over to schools for the schools to not only educate them, but to also raise them. Because these are the things that I see when you have kids almost 3 years old and not potty trained. And it's okay for you to go over to the corner and have your BM, and then I'll change it. But yet I want you in a bilingual school. It doesn't add up. You know.
Thank you again for sharing with us, Dr. Cheney. Thank you again.
Okay.
For questions.
You're
John
welcome.
Scotty,
Thank you, Dr. Cheney.
integrating.
Thank you too. Good to
You're
meet you.
welcome.
Thank you so
You
much.
too.
All righty,
You're
you all.
welcome. Great job, guys. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye.
Okay,
All
bye-bye.
right. All right.
Thanks for watching our video. For experienced legal services in Washington, D.C., Alabama, and Washington State, visit our website at remaslaw.com or call us at 1-833-329-1799.